All right, welcome back to Web 110, HTML, and CSS. So in the last two videos, I talked about working with Flexbox and grid layout, and they're often worked with in conjunction media queries. And media queries are basically, you can think of them if you are familiar at all with other programming languages where you might have like an if statement or a Boolean. It's basically, if this set of rules applies, then I want to do this. So you basically have a single style sheet, and you can say if the window is greater than a certain size, I want these styles to apply. If it is between these sizes and these sizes, then I want the tablet set of styles to apply. And then if it's smaller than that, I want these other ones to apply. And that's going to be the gist of this video, is talking about working with media queries. And I'm going to also try to include an example that could help you with your homework and then also with your final project in this video, just to try to keep everything together. I do have some other things that I want to talk about too, though, and I want to make sure I talk about these first so I don't forget to go over them. And these are things that help in general with your websites in making them more responsive. And then in particular, they could be things that you might need to include on your mobile version of your website. So I'm just going to start in the book with the viewport meta tag. This is page 292. And at the very beginning of the semester, I talked about the meta tag and how you can use it to specify other information. And in fact, let's see if I've got a link here for the meta tag information. Go ahead and delete those. So this is the W3 Schools page on the meta tag, and we have looked at the character set. I think I might have briefly talked about working with name and how you can use that for your SEO. So you can list a description, you can list keywords, you can have an author for the content, and that's all stuff that could show up in the search engine when it's pulling up your website. And then now we're going to be looking at this viewport. And what this is essentially saying, if you've ever gone to a website before where you were looking at it on your phone and everything just looked really tiny, it had the whole desktop website on it, but it was just super small, and you basically had to just zoom in order to be able to see anything, that's an issue with not having this viewport set. It's basically considering the exact size of what a website would be, and maybe it's trying to fit it where it's 100% of the space, and it's just not making it so it's compatible with your actual device's size. So this just is going to help scale things so that the scaling actually fits with your device. And pretty much every single time you're going to write it the same way. So it's really helpful to write this down in your notes, put it in your template. That's something that you might want to update in your template now, where you really want to use this every time. But you set the content, and this might look a little weird, but it's basically saying the width is going to be equal to the device's width. It's not like device minus width. It's just like how when you're working with your properties where you're using the hyphen a lot. So the device is equal, the width is equal to the device's width. So it's going to scale depending on if it's an iPad, if it's a phone, whatever it might be. And then you set the initial scale to 1. And what I really like about this page, and why I wanted to show this instead of necessarily highlighting the book, is they've got this really good example where they're showing this is what a website might look like where you don't have that viewport set and everything's really tiny, versus if you have the viewport added, it's going to zoom it in for you already, and it's going to make sure that everything's fitting the screen space. And so that's going to be one thing that you are going to want to do. Basically, from here on out, every single page that you make in HTML, you want to make sure that this is in your head section. Now, in the tutorials I'm going to do in class, for the sake of not having a lot of text, like you'll notice I'm not putting in external style sheets all the time. This is probably one of those things that I'm not going to include, just because it helps save space. But you, when you're working on your homework and the things that you're going to turn in for this class and in the future, you do want to make sure that you include it. So you might see me sometimes adding it, you might see me sometimes not adding it, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. So there's some really great information here. Like it says setting the viewport, it gives a little bit more clarity on that. The viewport is the user's visible area. It varies with the device. It will be smaller on mobile and then it is on a computer screen. They give you that exact text that you need, again, and then they give you information. The width equals device width. Part sets the width of the page to follow the screen width of the device. The initial scale sets the initial zoom level when the page is first loaded. So it's pretty straightforward. So what I'm going to do is, I said before that I really want to create an example that is something that you could use as sort of a template that could help you with a final project. So what I want to do is we're going to create a new file. And this doesn't have to be in the Bird. It could just be under week 5. But I'm going to call this media query. I'm trying to think if I want to... Let me create a new folder. Actually, I don't want this to get too confusing for someone who's not on a Mac, so I'll create the folder inside of here. So I'm going to create new folder. Let's call this media query. And then this one I can save as inside of the media query folder. Let's call this responsive. So that way we have different words for each thing, so it doesn't get too confusing. So we've got responsive.html, and that's going to be in the media query folder because it's going to use media query for it. And then this is going to be one of those times where I do want to create an external style sheet so I can demonstrate how this works. So I'm going to create another file. And that also is going to need to go in the media query folder. And I'm going to call this styles lv.css. And then with our responsive, we can kind of create our typical template in addition with that viewport. And then we'll just kind of add some other things to it as well. So for me, it's the 24th. Okay, so I want this to include more than just media queries. It's also going to just be responsive design. So I think I'm going to just call this responsive design. All right, so we can have as many meta tags as we want. And so we are going to add in our meta tag for our viewport. And so we're going to have name equals viewport. And the way that these ones that have name, how they work is you put in the name and then you have content. So let me go up here. So any of these, name, description. So you pick what sort of thing it is. If it's a description, if it's keywords, author, viewport, and then everything else falls under content. So if it is a description, you would write out your sentence or two in the content. In this case with the keywords, you put your keyword and then you separate it with commas to list out all of them. If it's an author, you put the name. With this one for content, you would put in these different settings and you separate them with commas. I want to say it's kind of a little similar to your it's not like quite like your inline styles. I guess the most similar thing would be like if you are listing out, you know what, never mind. I was going to say it's like listing out your classes or listing out your inline styles, but it's different enough that that would be confusing to compare it. So if you were to, for this one with the content, you list out your information with commas as well. So after viewport, we're going to put content, and then we're going to say our content, we've got the width is going to be equal to the device's width, and then comma, initial scale is going to be equal to 1.0, and then you end that. And then in this case, I'm going to have us put all of our styles in an external link. So we're going to do link. And I'm going to go back to our textbook because there's a couple ways that you can work with media queries. So with our media queries, let me see if I can find where that information starts. Now, if you recall back to when we were talking about linking to a print style sheet versus linking to a screen style sheet, you can actually do the same thing with this media attribute. You can say media is equal to, and then you can specify a certain dimension. And the way that these styles work is it goes in order. So a lot of times you want to think about the logic of how you're applying things. So I'll try to give you some examples and hopefully it will make sense. So we're going to say media is equal to, and then in the quotes I can say, well, for starters, we have screen. So before we use screen and we use print, so that way we could designate if it was going to be one versus the other. Oh, and then I also need to have my link to it. So we have styles.css was one of them. So in this case, instead of saying screen, I could say, I want a certain size parameter, and then I could have another one. And maybe this one is called, let's say it's called mobile. And I could say, I want a different size. So it's up to us to think about the logic. Now, your book and how it's kind of been working up until now is with a very desktop first approach versus a mobile approach. So part of what's going to be a little confusing about this chapter and this homework is you're going to be switching your styles so they are mobile first. And so you're going to want to have your mobile styles first. And this is just an example because you're going to put yours all in the same style sheet. But let's say that you did have links to multiple style sheets. You could have all of your mobile styles in one of them. And in this case, since it's coming first, you could just say, I want this to be screen. And it would apply to everything that's screen. And technically there's also handheld is another option, but just assuming these are all going to be the same. So in this case, we could say screen and then you could specify under what case. So, sorry, this is where you have to use logic in order to kind of think about it. So typically your mobile styles are maybe going to go up to, let's say, 600 pixels. So what's going to happen is this first set of styles is going to apply to absolutely everything. And so we want styles from 600 and up to be a new set of styles. We want the original set of styles to still come through. We don't want to overwrite it. And anything that's in this set is going to overwrite what's above if they share the same selectors and everything. So I have to say the minimum size, the minimum width that I want this to apply to is going to be 600. Oops, sorry, 600. Because any smaller than that, and that's going to overlap with our other set of styles. We wouldn't want that to happen. And then let's say that we had, let's say that was tablet. Let me call this tablet. So this won't actually exist, but So now with our desktop styles, I would want to say, okay, I still want it to be screen, but in this case, I want the tablet styles and the mobile styles to still apply. But if our screen is larger than, I'm going to say like 1020 is a good size. So I'm going to say if the screen, so the minimum size I want this to apply to is 1020. I don't need to list a maximum. I just need to list a minimum of when it's going to kick in. That's going to be when it actually starts applying. The reason why I don't need to include a maximum value for this one is because this is basically saying, you know what? I want all the styles to be mobile. And then what's happening is immediately after that, if the screen size is larger, it's going to say, well, actually, I want everything that's over 600 to now have these styles. So it's actually applying all the mobile styles, and then it's applying the tablet styles over top of them as well. And so that's why we don't need that maximum value, because immediately this next one kicks in and it's like, actually, you know what? I want to have these styles apply to anything that is going to be greater than 1020. So this is where the logic part gets a little confusing, because if you want it to be greater, you want to list the minimum of where it's going to start. And then if you want to do it the opposite, you're going to have to do it the opposite. So this is going to be for mobile first. So I'm just going to put a note here, mobile first, order, and logic. Versus if we had desktop first, order, and logic, we would have to do it the reverse. So we would say, I'll copy it and then I'll change the values. So in this case, we would start with our desktop. And I wouldn't need any of this. I could just say, I want it to be the screen. This is going to be the most basic one. And then in this case, I'm going to say, okay, well, if it's the desktop, then I want screen and the maximum size that I want the screen to be when this kicks in, so that way it doesn't accidentally overwrite anything above 1020, is going to be 1020 pixels. I wouldn't want it to go any higher than that, because it might accidentally overwrite it. I mean, it would overwrite it. Okay, and the mobile, I'm going to say I want the maximum for this to end up applying to be 600. So this is how you could have multiple style sheets. Now what I want for you to do, like with the final, is you're going to have a print style sheet and you're going to have your regular style sheet. So you will need to link to two style sheets, but all of your actual media query styles, I want you to put them all in a single style sheet. So this is going to work just for the purposes of demonstrating this to you, and to keep it from being confusing, I'm actually going to delete this. So if you want a copy of this, make sure that you write this out so that way you can reference it in the future. But I'm going to go ahead and, well, I'll delete most of them because I still want to have some of it. All right, so what we're going to do with our style sheet is we need to switch this so we're linking stylus.css, and I can just say screen and that'll be fine. And then again, for your final where you need to print your styles, you would just include one that says like print.css. You would switch this to print, and then you would be okay. So I'm going to leave that at least in here to keep this similar. Okay, but we're not going to bother creating the print style sheet though. So for styles now, what you're going to do is you are going to write all of your styles like you normally would. but these are going to start first with your mobile styles. So I'm gonna add a comment. Mobile styles go here. So you would list all of your mobile styles towards the top. Chances are you'd have like body, wrapper, you'd have your header, nav, all of that is going to go up here, and you're not going to have to worry about putting them inside of anything. Everything is just going to go up here. And then once you start getting to your tablet styles, you're going to have to write a media query, and that's where there is in your book, there's going to be information about writing a rule. So here's the @media rule. So it looks really similar. You say @media, and then you specify what the condition is that it would apply under, and then you just list out all of your styles. And they list all sorts of things that you could do, max device height, orientation, but for the most part, you're just going to focus on the minimum width or the maximum width. So I'm going to put @media, and then in parentheses, same thing, we have to think about, okay, well, mobile's coming first. So logically, we want to keep any styles that are smaller, so that way they still apply. We don't want to accidentally overwrite them. So again, we want the minimum width that these apply at to be set to, I'm going to do 600 again. And then after that, you put curly brackets, and then every single style that is going to be part of your tablet styles is going to go in here. And what I like to do is I like to indent this so it's a little easier to see. So then let's say that we've got styles, and it doesn't have to be everything. Chances are you're going to have the majority of your styles in mobile because it'll apply to absolutely everything. You only want to rewrite styles if it's going to be something that you really want to change. So I'm going to add just one more, for example. So I could say, okay, well, in the tablet section, I'm going to want to change the header, and maybe I want to also change the H1, and then the body and the wrapper, I might want to keep the exact same. And so I would leave it. And as long as there's not these styles, like these styles will overwrite anything that's the same up here. Now in header, I could say I want the color to be white. And here under header, I could say I want the background color to be black. And since it's not the same styles, both of them will still apply. So the header is still going to be white. It's just when I make this a certain size, since the browser's default is that the background is white. So you could even write a note to yourself here, the browser default is white. If it's mobile, that color should be white. And then when it's tablet, it should change so it's black. And we can end up changing these with some actual settings that will make sense in a little bit. Okay, so once you're done with your tablet styles, you can add in desktop styles go here. Make another rule. The minimum width that we want these styles to apply at, I'm just throwing out numbers, 1020 pixels. And then again, we need to have some parentheses, and then maybe this one, I want the header to be the same, and I'll just change the H1 to whatever sort of value. One of the biggest errors that you might get is just not having the right curly bracket, so you want to be careful that you maintain these, and that's why I like the indenting, because it kind of helps keep everything in order. So I think what I'll do to help make this show up is let's do the color of a paragraph, and we'll just change that to red. We'll do paragraph color blue, paragraph color green. And then I need to add in a body, and then we'll add in a paragraph. Oh, sorry, I'm thinking in CSS. So we'll just do our typical hello world. And then I need to go in here and I need to open up. Okay, so let's look at our styles again. So right now my text is showing up where the color is blue. So that's going to mean that the size, this width, is somewhere between 600 and 1020. So if I make it smaller, now we can see that it's turned to red. And then if I make it large enough, we can see that it changes to green. And if that's a little hard to see, I can zoom in. So we've got 600. And since I'm zooming it, it looks like it's not gonna work the same. So I guess that's something to be careful with. It might actually be easier to see if I changed it. So maybe what I could do is I could say here, I want the color to be white. And then maybe here I could do background color. Okay, so now you can see we've got the red behind it, blue behind it, green behind it. So you're going to want to make sure that you write your homework styles in the similar way to actually get these to show up. And again, you're going to have the majority of your styles up in the mobile section. So what the homework's going to tell you to do is you're going to move or delete a bunch of your styles, and then you're going to move the majority of everything to the mobile section. Some of the styles you have are going to move down to tablet or desktop, and then you're going to have to potentially write some styles to go in the tablet and the desktop section. So before I go into an example that's going to help, I want to just kind of go back through your textbook and help clarify a few things that they list in this area. Let me see. I think there was more in the viewport kind of section. All right, here's one thing that can be helpful. So this is saying if you have a mobile, if you're looking at a website on mobile, you might want to actually be able to call a number or text a number. So if you want to call a number, you this is kind of like how you can use the email. So in this case, if you do TEL, it means that if you click on that, it will open up your phone capability on your phone, your smartphone, and it will let you call the number, and then SMS would let you send a text message. So you can use these. So what we could do in our example is I could go and I could add in and I don't know exactly where you'd want to put this. We could maybe put it in like a footer or something. Let's do that. So what we would want to have is a link and then we would want to list we'd want to list what the actual thing is. So call that number, that would let you actually click on it, and then also it would let people know what the number is. So that is going to be for calling. And then if you want to text the number, you can do SMS. Now if somebody is on a desktop, this wouldn't work. So what you could do, I'm going to put this in a div. We'll have two divs. I'll have this one that lists it. Oh, sorry, and this one should say text. So we've got call and text. I'm gonna just put this in a paragraph. I'll simplify call or text at. Okay, so we're gonna call this class equals display mobile, just because that's pretty straightforward. Class equals display desktop. I'll save that. Let me do split screen with our styles so we can kind of see it at the same time. So we've got our class display mobile and display desktop. So what I need to do, and something like this you would probably put towards the bottom of your styles. So I'm going to say display, and sorry, I need to put the period in front, display mobile. Okay, so with the mobile one, we want the mobile one to show up, and it can kind of show up whatever way we want. So I might just say display block. That's going to be the browser default. And then I'm going to say display desktop is going to have display set to none. So only one of them is going to show up. And then what I can do is I can copy this. So tablet should be fine. Well, I guess it depends. Depending on your tablet, you may or may not be able to make phone calls or text. So in this case, maybe we would want this to change at the tablet, but because I put display desktop for simplicity, I'm going to just put this down here. And I'm going to switch these basically. So this one is going to be none. And then this one is going to be block. So you can use this to still have all of your content in your HTML page, but then be able to control which one is actually going to be there. And this is really handy. You could use this for, like, let's say you've got really big images and you want to switch which image is going to show up, or you could use this to maybe, because you'll find out in the next chapter, tables can be really unwieldy on mobile. They're very large. And so what you could say is, when this is desktop, I want the table to show, and then you could list the information in a different way, maybe outside of a table, maybe like a bunch of lists instead for the mobile version. And you could just completely replace things. Same thing, like maybe you've got a video on the desktop and you want to switch it so you don't have a video and you just have information. So you can use this display none to conceal things. So let me save that. I'm going to move this back over here. And then I'll refresh this. So now we've got, since it's this smaller version, so on mobile, it's showing up with both numbers. And then on tablet, it's showing up with both. And then now that it's getting to desktop, now it's just having the single one. And it's still inheriting those paragraph styles, which aren't quite working out, but that's fine. All right, let me take a look back at the book, make sure there's nothing else. All right, so this next one, I'm not going to have us download anything and have to worry about it. But it's pretty straightforward. Like, once you understand the idea of working with the media queries, I think you'll be able to get an idea for working with this. The idea here is also setting certain boundaries, and it's just trying to save somebody's internet connection and their data usage, so that way, rather than having to bring up a bunch of very large pictures, you can kind of save yourself from having to download something larger than what you have to. So what there is, and you can go back to previous pages to see more of the documentation. I'm going to do kind of a Cliff Notes version. This is page 307, but you have a picture element, and then inside of it, you have different sources. And what they do is they have an image fallback. So if someone's on an older browser, it just brings up the basic image that you want. But then you can use these source elements, and what you do is you have the type attribute set to image, and then you would choose what kind of file. Since these are WebP files, that's what they're choosing here. But if it was a JPEG, you could put JPEG at the end of that. So type equals image, and then you say, again, with media, what sort of point you would want that to fill in for. So they're saying the maximum size I want this small image to come in at is 480. So from 0 to 480, it's going to bring in the smallest kind of thumbnail picture. And then it uses source set to actually choose which image it's sourcing. And then you add in another one. And again, you wanted to think about the logic of how these stack over top of each other so they don't accidentally overwrite each other. So this one is saying I want the maximum width. This one is going to come in at 800. And that's your medium-sized picture. And then you've got one for large. And it doesn't need a dimension. It's just overwriting everything. And then here they have source media. And it's listing the different images. So that way that's all being brought in. So you could use this. This is something you don't have to use. It's part of why I'm not going into a ton of detail on it, but it's just something that is handy to know about. And you'll be able to see more information on the previous page 306, where it's going to talk about the picture tag, the source element. This is nice to know about in general because when we start working with video and audio, you're also going to be working with the source element. So that's something that gets used a lot for media that's more complicated than just your regular image tag. So that's all information that's going to be part of HTML5 in particular. And you'll see here it says the source set. So this is required, provides image choices for the browser in comma separated list. We've got media, that's optional, size is optional, type is optional. So the biggest thing is you just need a link to what your file name is going to be. And there's some really good examples in here. The last thing that the book really has before I go into my example is it just has some websites for how you can test what your website looks like on different displays so you can make sure that you can test on mobile. And so they got some resources here. I can't guarantee that all of these are still going to work. Now, what I usually recommend is testing on actual devices because that's going to give you a very clear idea of what things look like. You want to test in different browsers and you want to test in different devices. But what you can also do is you can right click on a page, and depending on the browser you're in, you're looking for a word like inspect, inspector. Right now I'm in Firefox, so if I click on right click, it takes me to inspect. If I go to this hamburger menu in the top, it's going to give me this option for more tools. And when you look for tools, you're looking for something using the words like web developer tools. And eventually it'll show you this screen, and this lets you see like the styles of a website. You can actually see the HTML of a website. And what you're looking for is there's this icon in the kind of right section that looks like a little phone in front of a tablet. And if you click on that, that's going to give you this option to preview something as a bunch of different devices. So this is kind of a pre-edited list. You can go in and you can kind of add different ones that you want to be able to see the design on. So here, this is previewing what this might look like on an iPhone. And I would want to actually see it on an iPhone to actually make sure that that's actually the case. You can flip it so you can see what it looks like horizontally, vertically. I could switch it. So maybe I want to see what it looks like on iPad. And this way you can preview what a website looks like. And you can kind of also look at it just responsibly, like how does it resize when you're looking at the page. All right, so I just opened up Chrome so I could show you this too. And I want to right click, and you'll see I also have the word inspect here. If I don't do that, there's this menu here with these 3 dots over top of each other. I can click on that, and this one I'm going to more tools. This one is called developer tools. I can click on that. Also will show me the same thing. Now it's going to show us a little bit different, but it's going to be the same idea where you've got this little icon with a phone in front of a tablet, and that should show you, which mine was already clicked on that, but if you don't have it, it'll just kind of show the website and you can kind of resize this area. But if you click on this, I can kind of choose different devices. I've got Galaxy Fold now. I can switch which way I'm looking at it. And this is real nice. We got this nice preview, and it gives us a little pointer trying to show kind of the clickable area with your finger. You can also edit your list. So if you want to choose different ones that aren't part of the default list. We've got our tablet sizes and then desktop. So rather than just resizing a window, this gives you a really great look. So when you are working with Safari, you're instead going to, you're going to need to actually enable the develop menu item. And let me find. So under, I don't remember if it's week 7 or 8. I think it looks like week 7. I should have a link that will tell you how to set all of this up. So I've got information, and the reason I put it here is because we're going to go over responsive design again, but I've got Safari responsive design mode, Firefox, and Chrome, so that way you can go and look up those steps again. Safari is probably the one that's the least straightforward, but you have to go to Preferences, your Advanced tab, and then toggle the Show Develop menu. So let me see if I've got that. So what this would look like is at the bottom, and I wish it was labeled a little better. There's this little, so I went to, you go to Safari, Preferences, and then the Advanced tab at the end. There is this little checkbox, Show Develop Menu and Menu Bar. You have to click on that. Once you've done that, it'll open up this Develop menu. And then from here, you should be able to do the same thing. Right click, go to Inspect Element, and it'll show something kind of similar. This one actually looks really similar to Firefox. And then I don't use Safari as often for this. So I think you would have to use this Show Web Inspector rather than being able to find it in any other menu item. So I think you have to go here or right click and do Inspect. Usually when I preview, I usually pick Firefox or Chrome to be able to preview them. I don't use Safari as much for that, but this will give you more directions if you are interested in it, so that way you can make sure that you can see everything. All right, so I'm going to continue this video, but I'm going to pause here, and I'll come back and we'll kind of set up our file.